Now, I want to talk about religious symbols in the workplace. Civil servants in Quebec and Canada have been banned from wearing them at work. What do you think? Is this a good move and something we should do over here? Should we adopt what they're doing? Or is this a worrying development for you, especially if you're a Muslim or a Sikh? We've got our God panel where we discuss issues like this in greater detail, but I'm obviously interested in whatever you've got to say on this. You can call me on 03459 440 445, or you could text 81869. Now, my guests on the God panel are Jasveer Singh. Hello.
How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Do you want to move a bit closer to the microphone so we can hear your lovely voice? And we've got Sonal Sachdev Patel. Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. And we've got Mohammed Barek.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, you're very humble. Come on, be proud. Say it, loud and proud. And then on the line, we've got Simranjeet Singh. Hello, are you there?
I am well. How are you?
Lovely. Now, you're over in Canada, so I want to find out a little bit more about it from you. So, as I said, we're talking religious symbols. I want you to get involved as well to let me know what you think. I told you the phone number and the text number. You can also WhatsApp on 07920 500 200 or email thebigdebate@bbc.co.uk. Can I start with Simran? Ajit, you're in the States, is that right, at the moment?
That's right. I'm in the States right now.
Yeah.
I just returned from
but you're from Canada. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure I got that right. So this rule has come in Canada. Civil servants are going to be banned. And, in terms of sort of our listeners and our audience, Sikhs wear turbans and Muslims Muslim women wear a hijab. So have we got more to fear from this? What do you think, Simran?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think one of the big concerns that we're seeing with this bill is that it is disproportionately affecting minority religious communities in Canada. That's primarily Jews who wear the kippah, Muslim women in particular who wear the hijab seem to be the most affected.
Right.
And then Sikhs who cover as well with turbans. And so that, I think, the impact of this legislation is part of what is leading to this intense feeling of discrimination, right? These are minority communities who are already marginalized and are now facing a law that is telling them that you actually don't belong to our society. You're not a real citizen of Quebec.
Yeah, I mean, the authorities there may see it differently, but why did they introduce this? Are you able to explain a bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I think this follows on the heels of the French model of secularism, which is called laïcité. And the idea there is really to strip religion from all government influence. And so in theory, I think it's well-intentioned, right? Like, let's remove government influence. Religious influence, I think, government spaces.
Yeah. Simran, the line's breaking up. I do want to hear this. Let's try and call you back, and sometimes that sort of helps to clear up the line. So we'll come back to you shortly. Mohammed, there's been a lot of concern over in France, over, as Simran was saying, about secularization over there. Basically, the splitting of, what the state does in terms of religion. You can practice your religion, but you do it privately. You don't, do it, bring your religious symbols to the workplace or to schools. And Canada's, Quebec is now doing it. How do you feel about this?
I think it's quite important to first...
Do you want to come a bit closer to the microphone?
I think it's quite important firstly to understand that many people wear religious symbols not as a headscarf or just as a covering, but actually as a religious statement and a belief that they're kind of doing that as a part of worship. So I think I relate that back to Sikhs wearing turbans, etc. as well. And what you have to understand is this is something quite important to people, that they make out their own choice to wear or cover their hair, etc., and go out into the public domain. So many people wear the hijab. So when people say, I understand that, okay, you want to keep kind of government secular and not kind of promote that there's religious kind of beliefs coming into that, but actually what you can say that our community should be well represented by the people that participates and actually actively kind of communicates in the community. So we shouldn't, my view is that I think this is detrimental to a lot of people who are wearing religious kind of attire, because it is pushing them away from actually positions of kind of affecting kind of governmental or debates or kind of policies, etc. like that. And I think that's quite concerning, because what that makes you think, the fact that if you're part of that community already, for example, let's say in Quebec, I read a story about a woman who was currently studying to become a teacher and actively wore a hijab, and subsequently, I think, graduated 2-3 days before the bill was passed, and then later found out the fact that once this bill's in place now, that she won't actively be able to become a teacher, and her exact comments were the fact that I wanted to become the best teacher in Quebec. Hands down, nothing to be, I want to be the best Muslim teacher in Quebec, I want to be the best minority kind of teacher in the Quebec. She felt part of the community. And actually, her religious kind of scarf did not actually determine what her contribution was going to be to the community whatsoever. It was going to be kind of her trying to be the best teacher. And what affected her was the fact that she said that I'm actually going to leave Quebec, because I'm not going to be able to kind of wear my religious attire and participate at the same time.
We've got Simran back, hopefully. Simran, are you back? Can you hear me okay?
I am, yes. Apologies for that.
No, listen, it's not your fault. Sometimes technology does things like that. Just very, very quickly, Muhammad was saying that he was talking about a case that he's aware of a teacher who sort of like felt that, under the circumstances, she could no longer teach there and will be leaving Quebec. Are there instances where this is starting to sort of like hit now, real people, affect real people in Quebec?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I was actually just in Montreal, in Quebec, a few weeks ago, and met with Sikhs, Muslims, Jews, and Christians, and particularly the Sikhs and Muslims there who I met with were talking about the possibility of leaving. Families who had been there for decades, people who had been born and raised in Quebec and had always considered themselves to be Quebecers, to be from that place and would call it home, and have now said, we have no future here, we have to leave. And I was in Ottawa, the nation's capital, as well. I met people who had left from Quebec, had moved, and had started life over. I was in Toronto and Brampton in the province of Ontario, and met people who had left Quebec over the past several months, and all of it for the same reasons, just feeling like we are not going to be treated fairly, we're not going to be given a fair shot, and why should someone stay in a place where they are being treated as second-class citizens? I think that's a reasonable response. A sad one, but a reasonable one.
Yeah, it is interesting. I wonder whether, after what Muhammad was saying, that if I'm interested to know if here in Britain you found it challenging to wear your religious symbols at work, what sort of, how would you feel about that? Would you actually leave work? Would it be that much of a compromise for you? Get in touch and let me know. You can call me on 03459 440-445, or you could text 81869. Here's a texter who says only Christian symbols should be allowed as we are in a Christian country. I think most people would sort of think otherwise, because, we've got all races, all religions over here. And that's probably what the strength of Britain is, isn't it? That it is all embracing. What do you think?
I think that...
Sonal.
I think both your previous callers articulated really well how it impacts the minority groups themselves. But if we think about how does it affect society as a whole, it's a really dark day for all non-Muslims, non-Sikhs, non-Jews, because by burying these religious symbols, all we're doing is we're further increasing the lack of understanding, the intolerance that already we're seeing increasing between religions. Often, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism are driven by the fact that we just don't understand each other, and that drives fear. So I remember after the 9/11 attacks that how the horrendous hate crimes increased towards the Sikh community because Americans were confusing Osama bin Laden with the turbans and the long beards. And I remember actually at that time the first violent kind of revenge crime was a Sikh in Arizona. So the fact that we're seeing this kind of confusion is only going to serve to increase if we bury these symbols. And what really worried me was the fact that teachers were included in this group of civil servants, because these are the people who are investing in the next generation. If they don't see all of these symbols, how on earth are they going to learn about diversity and where different people come from? And finally, by by forcing someone to not wear their turban or not wear their hijab or kippah, it's not changing them on the inside. So I think it's such a superficial law, and it's really badly thought out. I read yesterday that of the 36 groups that were consulted, only 2 were minority groups, and I just think the whole thing's appalling, honestly.
Jasveer, you're a Sikh. Where do you stand on this?
I think that it's frankly a racist law that they've now implemented in Quebec. I think that there's a very Eurocentric perception of secularism. Having trouble saying my words. There's a very Eurocentric perception of what normal is, in that to look a certain way, to be a normal part of society where you're not showing your own religion, your own culture, you have to have your hair cut, you have to be stripped of kind of any visual identities. But actually, there's always a statement in every type of thing that we're wearing, everything that we're wearing and everything that we're kind of portraying. And it's just about how you pick up on that. And there's also the kind of basic point of when they're saying that this is a move towards upholding Quebecy values, what are those values? And how does the sight of a Sikh teacher wearing a turban actually impose on those values? And I'm yet to get an answer. It's just kind of a really obscure term for what is essentially upholding racism. And this does really come back down to something that affects largely only people of colour, and therefore the wider society of Quebec are just like, it's not my problem.
What about the argument in France that, people are free to worship in whatever way, shape or form they want, but keep it private. Don't bring it into the public domain. Don't bring it into the workplace or anywhere else. And that a lot of the knots that we tie ourselves up into as societies, and the racial tensions are because of this, because people are making more and more demands, as some people would see it.
I think those mindsets stem from an understanding of perhaps Abrahamic and maybe largely Christian faiths as the kind of crux of religion. Religions like Sikhi are very different. The practice doesn't just happen on Sundays once a week. The practice happens every day of your life. And for Sikhs to be kind of part of society, this comes with Sikh culture. This comes with every individual Sikh, that we're going to practice our faith all day, every day. Sikhs are meant to stand out. So by kind of denying them of the ability to stand out, you're essentially trying to strip them away of their faith. You're stepping onto kind of basic foundations of democracy, of freedom of religion. And to see what the Quebec government are doing there, I think there needs to be a kind of an outcry from the whole of the world, really, and anyone that has any high aspirations for Western democracy.
So we're talking about religious symbols because they've been banned, religious symbols in the workplace, because they've been banned in Quebec and Canada. So I want to know what you think, whether you think it's an enlightened move or you think it's a very dangerous step. Get in touch and let me know what you think. You can call 03459 440 445 or text 81869. We've got a message come through on WhatsApp which says religious symbols are fine. There's small non-verbal statement of which religion you choose to follow, but having said that, religion should be kept at home. Problem in Britain is that we're far too tolerant of people bringing religion into the workplace. You choose to follow a religion and you shouldn't be pushing your beliefs into the workplace.
I would love to ask why. What is the problem? How does it impose on your working day to see somebody that might be wearing a kara next to you, to see a woman wearing a hijab next to you? What actual impact does that have? And if I'm honest, I don't think any of these people will have an answer.
No, and also, why should they separate their religion? Their religion is who they are. They're one and the same thing, so they can't leave it at home. And I don't understand what we're so scared about. This is all built on fear. It's this fear that if people bring their religion into the workplace, it's somehow influencing the decisions that they're making. It's moving away from a secular society. What are we so afraid of? We have to deal with that question first. This is a very superficial move.
Mohammed, I'm going to ask you, sort of like a big devil's advocate here, that some people would sort of argue that, when we came over to Britain, we knew what sort of country it was. Actually, it's very tolerant and open. But some people would say, well, you know what the rules are? Why are you trying to change the way we lead our lives? Some people may argue.
When you say that, actually, what are the rules? Can someone turn around and say that you have to go out and make sure you expose your flesh and expose your hair? And I think this is it. I think I agree exactly what you said. I think people are scared that why is a woman covering her hair? Why is she doing that? Oh, everyone here has actually got their hair open. Why is she doing that? And actually, people don't understand why certain religious attire is worn and the benefits from, potentially that they might consider from that. And yeah, I can agree that my grandparents came here over 70 odd years ago, and they came into this country and felt very welcomed and kind of continued to practice their faith. My grandma and my mother and my aunties and stuff all wore hijab from the day they got here, and I've actually experienced some issues sometimes, but actually, very tolerant. But many of the time, is people have a lack of understanding to understand why you do that. Why do people wear the kara? Why do people wear the turban?
So we need to work a bit harder at sort of like
educating. I agree completely on the
rather
school
than educate, I
community.
always find that weird, but sort of explain, who we are a bit more.
But
My daughter had a Muslim lady come into school last week to talk about Eid, and she came home and she said, "Mummy, this is what I learned about Eid. This is why." And she talked actually a lot about what the deeper points are. But her teacher wears a headscarf, and I'm really glad she does, because I'm not exposing her to Muslims with headscarves, because I don't have any friends who have headscarves. So good if she's getting it through school. But one other point in Quebec is that actually it's part of people's civil liberties to be able to practice their religion. And I think what the Quebec...
It's part of the human rights, isn't it?
What was done was this notwithstanding clause was used in order to circumvent that. And so there will be legal challenge towards it. But I think your point about people standing up for each other, the rest of the world. So I'm a Hindu. This really doesn't affect Hindus. We don't have that kind of outward...
Yeah, you don't have sort of like very visible, the way that Sikhs or Muslims would.
No, so it wouldn't affect us. But I would still stand up and say, this is not okay. It doesn't affect me. This isn't what Hinduism stands for. Hinduism stands for respect, tolerance and freedom. And
let me ask another question, another sort of devil's advocate question, so that we can, have a frank discussion, because there's no point us just, sort of slapping each other on the back and say, oh yeah, what we think is great. But, out there, some people say, but it doesn't end with you just wearing a hijab or a turban in the workplace. You then start making other demands in terms of, this and that and the other. They feel it, Jasveer, it's like creeping sort of more and more of your religion that you're drawing into
we've heard
your
phrases
diet,
like
all of those
Sharia
sorts of things.
and so forth. And
what would you say to that argument?
I would say yes, you're right. There would be kind of further stipulations for Sikhs, perhaps. They might.
But that's what worries people. It's not it's not just sticking with the turban.
I would go back to our original question of why and how is, let's say a Sikh also, as well as wearing the turban, they want to wear a kurban in the workplace. I would say, how is that impacting you? Give me evidence, if we're in a society now where we value our kind of scientific evidence so much, to show that that is a danger or that is having an impact. And I also want the people of Britain to understand that there is a growing feeling within the Sikh community and young Sikhs of resentment, and actually I'll use a strong word here, betrayal, or when it comes to people within Britain having that same kind of attitude we're seeing in Quebec. And I'll tell you why. Winston Churchill famously said that the British community is indebted to the Sikhs, that they came and they fought, and that was Sikhs that refused to take off their turbans. They weren't asked, you need to take off your turban to join the armies and fight for us in World War I and World War II. They said, this is how we come, and, if you want us to fight on your side, this is, how we are going to come. And they accepted them, and like I said, Winston Churchill turned around and said that. And now we're looking back, 50, 70, 80 odd years back now. And we're hearing modern day Brits say, well, actually keep your religion at home now. And that is really fueling a divide that on both sides. So if you're going to tell us to keep our religion at home, you know what? We don't feel British. That's the kind of sentiment that's coming out of.
Really? As strong as that?
Yeah, as 150%. There's many people that would not identify themselves, even though they're born here. And I'm talking for Sikhs, and I guarantee, you know, I go to so many talks and community meets that I can tell you there's hundreds, if not thousands of them out there that feel, you know, if people feel this way, and that's why we don't feel British.
Yeah, and some of the sort of laws protecting Sikhs have been sort of hard fought, haven't they?
Yeah.
Had to go to court,
exactly.
long legal
People
battles
threatening
to
burn
do that.
themselves
Is
alive,
it? I mean,
yeah.
there's no suggestion anything like this is going to happen here, because we are pretty. I mean, around the world, we're pretty. When you step back, yes, there are issues and all of that, but Britain's quite amazing overall, isn't it? But if there was something like this, there would be a lot of legal challenges, I would have thought, wouldn't there, Sonal?
I mean, Dill, I think just to help support you in your devil's advocate argument, but just making the point that I don't agree, a lot of the thought process was around the kind of equality laws that Quebec had, and this idea of kind of flushing out homophobia and all of those aspects. The confusion I think that was made was that if someone's wearing a hijab, then they are more likely to be homophobic, and therefore they shouldn't be ruling in a court. You know, we shouldn't see that in a judge. That's where taking away their religious symbol is completely missing the point. If there are those issues, if Quebec see those issues in society, then there are other ways of dealing with it by going out into the community and engaging in dialogue with different minority groups. But the fact that only 2 minority groups out of 36 were consulted says it all.
We're nearly running out of time. Just probably got about a minute to go. Mohammed, overall, this saddens you?
Yeah, this is institutionalized discrimination. Limited opportunities for people who wear religious attire, and it's a very difficult time that it could potentially be a global problem, and I think we need to get together and kind of combat
You're
that.
worried about sort of like another type of creeping in of, you know, first France, now Quebec, and there was also Belgium.
Austria.
There was talk of Belgium and all of that
Quite
sort
a
of
few
stuff.
European countries.
That the
Austria,
rules may start to change.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very worrying, I think, for our community, and I think a lot of people who practice their faith openly, and I think there's a lack of understanding, and I think there's something needs to be done to educate people. I know we always say educate people, actually, but just having a chat with people and say why we do certain things, but it has to be combated, because religion is a part of people's lives, and I think we should always embrace that and accept the fact that people live different lives.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's Mohammed Parekh. We've also got Sonal Sachdev Patel, Jasveer Singh, and on the line from USA, but he's actually from Canada, was Simranjeet Singh.